So, welcome to today's session. Delighted to have you here joining us for this one. So, this particular webinar is with the NHS IMAS team, so the interim management and support team who are part of NHS England. And so I'm Jo Stanford. I am Chief Exec of the Healthcare Project and Change Association, so leading the development of the project and change workforce across health and social care, but particularly the NHS, as we work on supporting individuals employed by the NHS to have valuable and meaningful careers. And part of that workforce work, we are doing working collaboratively with colleagues at NHS England and also working with the other non-clinical professions, so the people profession, finance, the digital and IT profession, procurement, particularly to look at how do we support what we're calling the business professionals to develop meaningful careers so that we can manage the workforce, so that we can ensure that people have opportunities for talent management, career progression, that we support underrepresented groups with better access and more opportunities. And part of that is, as a career trajectory, where do you get to? Now, historically, it was very much a case that if you were a project professional working in the NHS, there was pretty much a glass ceiling where you couldn't get beyond a certain level and still be a full-time program project professional. More roles are starting to come out now, and we're looking to support with additional roles that can support at a much more strategic level. So you're much more likely to see program or project director now. There's also starting to be the emergence of both heads of profession and chief project delivery officers. And that development of that role has come out of the Infrastructure and Projects Authority at Cabinet Office. And the IPA has mandated government departments to have a chief project delivery officer. And as part of that, what we want to do is say, well, actually, how do we support within the NHS to have equivalent roles to the CIO, the CFO, the CPO, and make sure that the project and change profession is up there at a strategic level, able to influence decision making. Because when we look at the amount of investment and change that goes on organisationally, but across the infrastructure, it is massive. And part of that is having people in the right roles that can influence strategic decision making, but also with the knowledge and skill and experience to be able to do that. So part of that is our role to help to get people on that trajectory, but also it's the opportunity then to support people with meaningful careers at strategic levels. And that's not always about having a permanent post. If you have the skills to lead complex projects and change, if you've got strategic decision-making skills that might be deployed in different parts of the system, there's an opportunity then to say, well, how do we retain people, but make best use of those skills where it's needed at the right time? And Karen and Danny and I have been talking for quite some time about how we can work collaboratively between IMAS and HPCA about how we support people at that level of their career. So I'm going to hand over to Danny and Karen now to let them talk to you about what they do at IMAS and how they can help to support you with more flexible career opportunities at strategic levels. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today. It's over to you guys.
So that's great. Thank you. So yeah, great to see everybody this morning. So I'm Karen Robinson. I'm head of NHS IMAS and also currently the acting deputy director for resourcing development at NHS England. The focus of today's conversation is just to brief you really and give you a bit more awareness of the services that NHS IMAS provides, with the IMAS standing for Interim Management and Support. So we're going to provide a bit of an overview of who we are and what we do, so our core offer. We'll focus on eligibility and roles. We'll touch on the specialist registers that we hold, and we'll also bring alive really some of the examples of NHS IMAS assignments just to give you a flavour of what it is we do and what they look like. We'll also provide an overview of some of the important statistics that we have and some of those testimonials. And I'm going to be joined today on the presentation by my colleague Danny Wood and also Andrew Aitken. So we're going to work through those next few slides with you. So onto the overview of what is NHS IMAS and what is it that we do? So we've been established for about 14 years now, and very much around offering NHS organisations that need short or medium term support the means to access the expertise that exists throughout the NHS. And we aim to really encourage and facilitate the NHS to use the wealth of skills it already has access to, and provide support in a way that builds a sustainable legacy and grow and develop local talent working with NHS leadership development. And it's very much around not only growing and developing talent, but also retaining talent as well across the NHS. So how do we do that? Well, our core offer is very much around tailored to organisations and individuals. So with organisations, we provide support that's tailored to the needs of the client, and we provide support to any NHS organisation in England. And we also do that to try and help deliver sustainable change. So it's about learning good practice. It's about going in and delivering specific pieces of work over a period of time, and then being able to share that or perhaps take that back to substantive employment and roles. There are no charges in addition to the cost of the pool member, so it's something that we provide free of charge for both the organisations and individuals. So to join us and to use our services is free, and we are funded by the NHS to save the NHS money, so that can be reinvested obviously in improved patient care. And through that, we have an access to a pool of senior talented NHS individuals. Danny will come on to eligibility and roles shortly, but it's very much focused at band 8D roles and above, but also we're able to access band 8C who are looking for their next step in their career. So as I've mentioned, very much about growing and developing local NHS talent, and reducing the dependency on the private sector for organisations. And the offer to individuals, well, we support pool members when they're on assignment. It's very much around wrapping around the support, not only for the organisation, but for the individual themselves on assignment. We give access to career development opportunities, and there's also access to NHS IMAS pool member development opportunities that we provide, whether that's coaching, mentoring, kind of access to some of the webinars where we share good practice, and also some training and development that we can provide, help and support the pool members that we have registered with us. So I'll hand over to Danny now just to go into a bit more detail about eligibility and roles. Thanks, Danny.
Fabulous, thank you, Karen. So yes, I'm Danny Wood. I'm Senior Manager for NHS IMAS, and yeah, I'm just going to take us through a couple of slides. So the first one is around eligibility and roles that Karen mentioned, and our core business in the main is at the more strategic senior level roles at NHS Agenda for Change, Band 8D and above or equivalent. That's across all NHS organisations, be it provider, ICBs, regional and national NHS England roles. So it covers the whole spectrum. And we also look at staff who are currently in 8C roles looking to develop into that next 8D opportunity, and a lot of the time interim opportunities are a good way of doing that. We also work closely with the regional talent management teams in this space as well to try and support that talent pipeline through the system. So we're open to working with all staff at that senior level, be that board or sub-board level across the healthcare setting, but we are conscious as we're moving into new times. There's a lot of crossover into local government and other governmental departmental roles. So that kind of cross-cutting experience and learning can be really valuable coming from one type of public sector organisation into another, as well as bringing kind of private sector experience into these types of roles as well. And in terms of the types of roles and the types of inquiries that we get in, they are both on an interim and consultancy basis, so we can be very flexible with the people joining our pools and their changes in personal circumstances in the types of roles that we can offer them. So we have executive board level positions such as chief execs, directors of ops, finance, and all the usual ones you'd expect to be in there. But then we also have large scale programs, as Jo mentioned in her opening, kind of program directors, project director roles, program leads, PMO, etc. So we do cover the wide spectrum of program and project type roles, and that can be on an interim full-time basis to deliver a specific piece of work, but also potentially on a more consultancy type support. So we've had types of inquiries in whereby they might need someone to do a diagnostic. Now, it could be a diagnostic of a service or could be diagnostic of a PMO function. Is it running? Is the governance there? Is there anything that as an organisation they can do differently or better? So we cover both the longer term and the shorter term options, as I've said, to give that kind of variety and choice, which can be helpful to people's individual circumstances. And then just to talk a little bit about specialist registers. So as Karen mentioned, when people are on assignments and when people join our pool, we try and offer bespoke support. Now, that covers a number of guises, but one of which is around coaching and mentoring. And this just gives a little flavour of some of the types of schemes that we have up and running at the minute to do that kind of peer-to-peer support function across different specialisms. So we have a pool of what we call partners who are senior chief execs from across the system, who are signed up to advocate, is probably the best way to describe it, for NHS IMAS. And what they have also signed up to do is offer people coaching and mentoring support when they're on assignment, but also at times when they're not on assignment as well, to support their development and support them to be successful in the roles that they are in, and use that experience that they may get from an interim placement to be able to take that into their next, hopefully more substantive role. As well as that, at a high level, we do have a peer-to-peer chair and chief exec mentoring program, which can also be accessed for people going through kind of leadership programs such as aspirant director and chief executive programs. And then coming on to a more bespoke one, for example, we're doing some work at the minute with the Proud to Be Ops network, specifically around a peer-to-peer mentoring in the ops space for people within that network to access and use. Alongside that, we do hold what we call specialist registers, which are where people with certain skills and expertise may be deployed into an organisation at short notice, and they're kind of pre-approved, pre-vetted, and have lots of knowledge and experience in specific areas to go into support. And two examples of that is we have a chief nursing officers exceptional leaders network, which essentially is whereby you may deploy a very experienced chief nurse into an organisation that might be struggling, but also maybe to support a newly appointed chief nurse in their first few days, few months, few weeks of the role. And we also finally have an experienced pool of improvement individuals who might be parachuted into challenged organisations for a short period of time to help usually turn them around in a certain area. Now that's kind of cross specialism, so that could be a very specific niche area, or it could be something a little bit more generic. But in this space, I'm thinking particularly around program and project management. There's be a lot of opportunities where CQC may come in. They may have issues with governance, running of programs, etc. And a lot of times on these occasions, they need somebody with a strong PMO program background to come in and help them identify tangible, meaningful action plans that they can take forward as an organisation. So that's everything from me. So I will now hand over to Andrew, who will bring a couple of case studies to life. And then at the end of Andrew's bit, we can go into questions and answers, I believe. So Andrew, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Danny. So I'm Andrew Aitken. I'm a program manager with NHS IMAS, and some of the example assignments that we do now, as Danny's previously touched upon, is that so we do cover both the interim space, but also the projects and program space as well. So what I've done here is try to pull out a few of the different examples that we've got to kind of cover off some of the specialisms, but also some of the different types of organisations that we work with as well. So for example, example number 3, the Emergency Operations Transformation Project Lead. This was quite what we'd probably describe as a bit of a niche role to lead on some of the significant programs, to effectively set up the PMO, but also lead their governance as well for those programs. This is quite a long-standing assignment that we've got. It's been going on for almost 2 years, but effectively that person now kind of ultimately end up chairing the actual project board as well. So that's quite what we describe as a bit of a success story. But effectively, we do see quite a lot of assignments like this where they often start off as something new, but they end up start off as something quite niche, but end up broadening out into end up either leading the program, overseeing the entire project, or kind of leading on a new piece of work for them. So some assignments are fairly time limited, but some end up kind of go on to other things as well. So, for example, the assignment number 6, the example assignment number 6, the CRM project manager, the national organisation. This was a person that was brought in to lead on quite a specific area of the new CRM overhaul program system, but effectively they've now ended up leading the whole second phase of the whole system overhaul. So again, quite what started off as something quite niche has ended up turning into something quite broad. So these assignments do offer, I suppose, a little bit of scope to develop skills and interest into new areas, but also to kind of lead on specific areas that people may be interested in. Now, other examples there are, I suppose, some of the more interim base assignments that are sort of our core areas of sort of not necessarily project-based roles, but some of the more interim style roles, such as Deputy Director of Improvement, where somebody was kind of brought in, got a bit of a project background to lead a Challenge to Q Trust to develop its new cultural organisation development improvement programmes. So they were kind of parachuted in quite quickly to lead on that programme, to effectively deliver something that wasn't there necessarily before, but they then end up actually achieving a permanent role through that assignment. So sometimes people do end up achieving those permanent roles through this, but effectively we're in the interim space, but can often end up getting something else out the back of it. So Danny, if you move on to the next slide, please. So these are some of the NHS IMAS statistics that we are quite proud of. So the client feedback one, you'll see there that we've currently got 100% of clients that have used NHS IMAS again in the future. Now that statistic comes from what we call a closure call at the end of an assignment. So throughout the whole life cycle of an assignment, we'll do the full scope at the beginning. We'll help manage the assignment as it goes through the full life cycle of the program, and then towards the end, we do what's called the closure call with the client to fully assess the success of the assignment, how well it's either delivered sustainable change, whether it's achieved value for money, and effectively just give a bit of an overall evaluation as to how the assignment's gone. And some of the other statistics that we've got there, the financial savings. So this year we're currently estimated at 3.5 million savings to the NHS. Overall, we've saved approximately 160 million since its inception, since 2009. So that figure is based off a comparative value against independent executive agencies who are operating in a similar sort of sphere that we do as well. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Some testimonials and feedback. So these are just some high-level feedback, feedback with testimonials that we received from chief executives from Foundation Trust, acting chief exec from a community interest company, and the head of HR and OD from national organisation. Now, all of these tend to focus on around about the value for money in terms of cost, but also the quality as well that these people have delivered to their assignments, but also to the organisation as well. Because one of the things that we're keen to do, and whilst we operate in the talent space, is that kind of cross-cutting of experience whilst learning something new in a new role, but also bringing that either back to the home organisation or taking that that experience they've gained through to a new role in the future. And next steps. So effectively at the end of this presentation, we'll share the copy of this presentation in our standard NHS IMAS application form. We can talk through how we join the NHS IMAS register, but effectively it's just completing the IMAS application form, sending an up-to-date version of your CV, and that's kind of it really. But we're also here to talk through any opportunities you may have, or any areas that you may be interested in developing in, really.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a hand up, which is great. So, Victoria, do you want to ask your question while others think of theirs?
Yeah, so it was a really good presentation, thank you. I do work in NHS England, but I wasn't quite sure what the IMAS support was, so that's been a really good overview presentation. So if I was I understand the application process, but if I was interested in kind of a stretch assignment moving up for my current role, how would I kind of identify those roles? How would you sort of, I know if I was on the register, but how would I find out kind of what opportunities were around?
Do you want me to jump in with that one? I can jump in with that one, Karen.
Yeah.
So I suppose there's a couple of ways, but in the main, what we do is as we get pieces of work in, we will let you know, usually by phone, about all them opportunities. So in essence, then you can get the background, the context, the scope, and I suppose the client's requirements in the sense of they need somebody who can come in, drop everything and start tomorrow. Or actually, this is something they've pre-planned for. You've got a little bit of time to negotiate a bit of release, finish off any piece of work that you're currently doing, etc. And then you can kind of take all that into consideration when deciding if you wish to go forward. And when we say go forward, in the first instance, we do always usually share a CV to say this is the type of person, skills and experience. We also promote that initial call as well, that you can have directly with them to really get into the bolts of what they want and need, because sometimes them saying, oh, we just need somebody to run this project, actually there's a lot of stuff underneath that which they may not tell us, which the pool members in them spaces can a lot of the time unpick as well. And conscious people's circumstances changes, so feel free to say no as much as you like, conscious that people may be available but then all of a sudden might not be available for the next 6 months. Using NHS England as an example, obviously there's a lot of change at the minute within NHS England. People might not be wanting to move to see what happens over the next few months. Again, absolutely fine, there's no pressure, it's just join the pool, we would let you know, you can take everything at the time into consideration and decide whether you want to explore it any further.
Thank you, that's really helpful, thank you. Okay,
fantastic, thank you, Victoria. So Tolly, you got your hand up, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, yes, thanks, Joe. Unfortunately, I can't turn my camera off, so it's for some reason it's disabled, so I don't know. So I'm not hiding to point out. No, this is a really good initiative. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, really. So I've been filling in the templates with the hope that I can submit it at some point. How much detail do you need in section 3? Or do you have a checklist of skills that you expect people to be able to tick against? So, or is it just okay to be quite kind of broad in that section? And then my other question is the NHS Horizon, albeit they focus more on transformation and change management. Does that have any link with this, or how? Or is it, does that give you a competition? I guess that's the, they don't have a similar program because they run their own independent team, but how does that align with what you're trying to do, I guess?
Oh, good questions. I'll let Danny answer the first one and I'll go for the second. How about
I was going to say I know a bit from my old job about Horizons, but so yes, so in terms of section 3, feel free to be quite high level. And what I would say, just as a generic point on filling in the form, don't feel like you also need to repeat things which are in your CV as well. So as part of the process, we would kind of ask for an accompanying copy of the CV. So yeah, don't feel like you need to double count things essentially within the kind of CV and application. That's absolutely fine because we will review the CV as well. And if it's anything more niche around specialisms in your CV, don't feel like you need to do a really long list in the application form because we'll be able to pull those out as well. If there's any, I would stick to if there's any specific high level things that you really wanted to know, highlight them in the application form. But yeah, don't worry about a huge list, is what I would say for that one. Go on, Karen, I'll let you do Horizons then.
Yeah, so, well, yeah, just on Horizons, yeah, really great question. I mean, when you look at the remit of NHS IMAS and really what we've delivered over the last kind of, 14, almost 15 years, it's very much about enabling and helping and supporting NHS organisations, other parts of, kind of central government, but also NHS England as well. It's something that we are very aware of. We work very closely with a number of programmes and different teams, as well as alongside CSUs as well with the commissioning support units. So it's almost about being able to deliver what's right for the requirements of the organisation. And like you say, NHS Horizons have a particular scope and areas of specialism. So I wouldn't say that we were in kind of direct competition with them. It's kind of a different set of skills that would help support and enable.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things I would say as well, kind of touching specifically on the CSU point as well, is kind of, I suppose NHS IMAS in the main is probably more around individuals. So you need an individual to be able to deliver X, whereas specifically with the CSUs and potentially a bit more with Horizons as well, it's a kind of service of support. So it may be an individual who can deliver the service, but a lot of the time it may be more than one person.
Yeah, almost like a package of work, is it? Right? Whereas we focus on the individuals.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just coming in on that one, I think what Horizons focus on is the processes, the ways of doing it, the training to support individuals to do that, rather than the management of those individuals and their careers and deploying people into it. So but there's a great synergy there, which is fantastic. We've got a question from Carl. If you want to ask your question, we've got a couple in the chat. Get them in the chat or in the Q&A section if you want to ask your question, or stick your hand up because you get preference if you do. Carl?
Do you want to do the chat ones first, or shall I go?
No. When you
said I've got a question, I've got several. Sorry. So if I've understood right, so essentially what you're providing is a interim consultancy agency, effectively. If I got that right? So the people in your pool, are they effectively needing to be 100% commitment into this consultancy agency, or is there room for expertise, people who are in a permanent role that have an expertise that could be that some if the need arose and their time could be freed up, then they could sort of come across, because you mentioned they're sort of like full-on interim post and also consultancy sort of like input.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have a cross section.
You have a mixture of that. So you could reside in a particular place, but have a side role through you, if providing the time can be freed up.
Yeah, it's very much about release. So so whilst we are a bit of an introduction service rather than a kind of an agency, because we don't have any particular fees involved, and very much around I suppose very much around getting the right person, the right opportunity, and the right role for the organisation and the client. So we're very much around, we have people who are currently in the NHS, so they can potentially be released on secondment, or we have people who've been in the NHS but are currently outside of that, and we class them as our independents, but they could be brought in either on a preferable day rate or on a fixed term contract. So we have quite a wide cross section of people with different circumstances, which comes back to the point Danny raised, that if we phone you to say, oh, actually we have a role which we think you might be interested in, you could say, oh yeah, that sounds great, but I'm just currently not available.
Sure. No, I mean, so the angle I'm coming at from this is from a sort of like retention and development for our own people. Actually don't want to leave the organisation, but they need some extra challenge. So I see, this could be an extra string to a bow that kind of makes a package for an individual and we get we get some retention and then don't go off to pastures new, because they can get their or the challenges around the patch. So that's my first question. So we seem to spend lots of money on consultants, which is frustrating for us and actually one of the things that we're doing in Nottingham is to building up internal capability, so that rather than spend the money outside, we're spending the money with a bunch that are committed to the organisation and can retain the learning and all the rest of it. But so I mean, are the external consultant effectively your competition? And if so, there must be an absolute, because surely you're better for NHS than these external consultants. It's a no-brainer. So how do you regard those consultancy agencies like PA and stuff that come in and do stuff?
I mean, it's a really good question. So and we accept we are not the only solution, and we are part of a choice of many. So one of the things that we're doing a lot of work with, along with other programs within NHS England workforce supply area. So one of the programs is actually about temporary staffing, and we're also kind of looking at kind of recruitment and retention, but it's very much around how could we be, really our aspiration is be that first point of contact. So we're very much looking at supply and demand at the moment. So whilst we are actively encouraging organisations to contact us with their interim assignments and kind of areas of work, we also need to make sure we've got the supply of registered pool members. So we're constantly doing work on that, but we're also wanting to make sure that if we could be that first point of contact, we turn it around really quickly, and if we haven't got anybody registered available, then we can go back and say that that's the case, but at least check with us first. And often it's about packages of work as well. Again,
there's nothing more frustrating when someone comes and says, I'm looking for I don't know, director of finance. Have you gone anywhere else? Oh, well, I just put a couple of feelers out, and then we ring somebody and say, Hayes have already asked me about this one, or kind of whoever. So we always say kind of give it 24, 48 hours, and then if it's looking like we're struggling, feel free to kind of explore other options. I'm conscious the world doesn't stand still. But and
as Danny said, some of our pool members are registered with those external agencies, private sectors, as well as with ourselves.
I've got two more very quickly. I think you've possibly answered this one already. So you've talked a lot about individuals coming in, but sometimes there needs to be a team of people coming in. I think, do you say that was not your bag and that was what Horizon still, or was it that is something that you may or may not do?
It depends. So it would depend on what you need. In the main, we're more about the individuals than the service. But I suppose if you said we are, I don't know. We did a lot of work kind of in COVID, like people setting up kind of incident rooms and all that stuff. And they said, right, I need an incident director, an incident manager, and something else. Then we could look for the individuals to fill them roles, but it still is more about the individuals than the service, if I'm making sense.
If a new program was being set up and they needed some PMO resource and a program director, again, we could look at that, but it would be about the individuals. And often some of our assignments will have somebody go in to do an initial piece of work. They come up with the recommendations, and then the organisation might come back to us and say, actually, have you got the skills and expertise registered with you to help implement this? Because the person who went in initially to do, maybe the diagnostics isn't the right person then to deliver the next phases of the programme. So we also get an element of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Last question, and then I guess.
Oh, we've lost you.
Yeah, sorry, this seems has got a life of its own. My camera's my camera is working.
It is. You can see you now.
I don't know. It just switches itself off. So the as you've been talking, I've been thinking, this is what we're trying to do internally to ourselves in terms of effectively having that internal recruit, train, develop, share out, loan out, and all the rest of it. So I'm kind of thinking I really want to tap into some of your expertise and experience in terms of things like the coaching and the mentoring, just to learn. Obviously you do it at a different level and a different standard. So is there any opportunity to sort of tap into some of your experience so that we can nick it shamelessly for our own?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to have some, you know, kind of separate conversations, you know, with Danny and Andrew and myself, and where maybe we can, you know, help and support you, you know, going forward. So don't feel like you've kind of got to set up something independent. There could be something actually we could be part of that solution with you.
Sure, and I'm sure Joe's thought very similarly, because I know Joe.
It is a very, very topical subject, actually. So I was at the HPMA conference last week, so the People Management Conference, and there was a lot of discussion about collaborative banks. And obviously that was aimed at clinical workforce, but as a model that could work really well for project and change people, potentially for IT and digital people, where there is effectively an agreement for a collaborative pool or bank where across a number of organizations, could be an ICS, it could be regional, that there's a host employer, but that people could be deployed as and when needed to support both their individual professional development, but also to meet that changing demand across the system. But also when you talk about deploying teams, if you think about the organizations that are rolling out EPR programs at the moment, there's teams of people who've been working on that in one organization that would probably be great to then support another organization with the setup and development of that, because they've got the knowledge, skill and experience. So if that's what something you want to have a chat about and follow up on, Carl, I'm looking to follow up on some conversations I had with people who are doing that kind of work in other areas, and see how we could potentially do that for the project workforce, project and change workforce.
Yeah, and just some of the examples that Andrew was sharing, I'm thinking, yeah, we're doing that here. And we're doing that, you know, the maternity transformation, very topical for Nottingham. You know, so you know, there's nothing new under the sun. I'm sure there's things that we could have learned from that if we'd realised it, you know. So.
But again, this is something that's of relevance to quite a few of the sort of business professional kind of workforce, where there is more value in being a bit more flexible about the kind of employment and deployment processes. And again, that part of the conversation with the people profession is how do they in their HR and L&D and OD roles help to support us with that kind of workforce processes that can be different. Thank you, Carl. Great question, and we'll follow up on that one. And again, there's an opportunity, I think, for us all to collaborate on that kind of model going forward. Maureen, you've been very patiently waiting. I know you've had your question in the chat. Did you want to just have a quickly raise that and just see what that feedback is? Because I know Danny mentioned it. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Andrew has replied, because I'm a band 8A. And obviously, I want to progress with my career, learn. So Andrew said we can have an offline chat about it, because there are some circumstances whereby there might be opportunities. So I have sent Andrew my details and we can chat offline to see.
Yeah, and again, just coming back to the conversation we were just having, even if IMAS is leading on a more strategic level, so those in high roles, if we're then talking about potentially looking to develop sort of ICS or regional pools or banks of people that we can then work on deployment, that could then be a much broader set. So everybody from a project support officer all the way up, because everybody needs that kind of resource to be able to manage their programs and projects. And then coming back to Carl's point about expensive contractors or consultants or agencies, if we can manage that resource internally, it does two really great things. It retains the knowledge, skill and experience. It gives people a really meaningful career, and that's going to then help us with both recruiting people to come and work in projects and change in the NHS and retaining them throughout their career pathway, because there's something really meaningful that they can do. So hopefully we'll be working on that development, and therefore that'll give you some more options as well, Maureen, at some point.
Yeah, and I suppose just to build on that as well, Andrew's the best person to speak to, as he's a kind of our lead on it around the kind of talent space more generally as well, and the links into different regions. So some kind of signposting and other networking opportunities, I'm sure, on the back of that conversation as well.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. We did have another couple of quick questions. In fact, so there's a staffer asked the question about how could the private sector help support the IMAS offering?
So so I suppose it's, in a way, there's probably a couple of answers I could think of off the top of my head. So firstly is just by networking people through to us, I suppose, is the first thing. So kind of, obviously, a lot of private sector organisations have healthcare connections, and we're happy to kind of work and provide support with those types of organisations as well, because you've got the community interest companies, not-for-profit companies, etc., etc. There's lots of in this changing world, lots of kind of different types of organisations doing work across healthcare. So it's signpost them through to us, kind of have those conversations and kind of see what's the most appropriate thing to do, probably is what I would say. Do you have anything to add, Karen?
I think for me, it's about that networking and having those conversations, because the more we are having, events like this as well, and being able to share, what the NHS IMAS offer is and looks like, and, what's the art of the possible. And it's very much around, for us, is staying relevant for the NHS and actually being able to adapt and be flexible to the changing needs of the system, which has been obviously one of its success for, it's obviously been in existence for the length of time it has, and, gone through many iterations of change. So we're really open to kind of opportunities and suggestions. And I think just being clear on where the boundaries are and the scope is the other thing. But always great to have those kind of conversations and to expand the understanding. So
I think we've exhausted the questions that are in the chat. I do have a question myself, actually, which is, how do you support your members with both professional development and pastoral care whilst they're on assignment? But also, how do you reflect on their increased knowledge, skill and experience in terms of the roles and then the band that they might be reflected on, if they're a part of that?
Yep. Danny, do you want to make a start, and I'll add?
I shall make a start. So in terms of, I'll probably take them back to front if that's okay, Joe. So in terms of the kind of individuals file, we have a kind of sophisticated recruiting system, and each individual has a file with us, and essentially we track their journey with NHS IMAS, I suppose, for a want of a better phrase. So what we're able to do is look at the background and experience from when they join, the types of assignments that they've done with them, and the evolution of that, the feedback, the impact, because as well as kind of what we've touched on as the client providing feedback of how they find it, did the person deliver, etc., etc. There's also the pool member side of what were they brought in to do, what were they able to do, what impact did that have. So how did it benefit them? So we capture it from the client, but we said, but also from the pool member side as well. So we're kind of able to build a portfolio of the individual and what they're wanting to do. We keep in very close contact with them as well. So throughout the assignment, we're talking to them relatively often in terms of how it's going, but also then post assignment, we will have those conversations, like you said, Joe, of right, you've been able to do this. Unfortunately, it might not have gone substantive, so you're going to have to go back, but conscious people don't tend to like going back once they've been out somewhere and they get a taste for it. So kind of how do we work to kind of progress your career individually? So that's how we do that bit in terms of the individual. In terms of, so NHS IMAS ourselves have developmental support that we offer, but it's probably on a more high level basis than a niche kind of professional development, for example, in the project space. So we have things like NHS Select memberships. We have things like senior speakers from across the system, across different topical areas. We have a course around that we've developed over a few years around consultancy skills and facilitation skills. So we have things which could be topical and beneficial and are kind of nice to have for individuals who are on our pool. But I suppose in terms of the professional side of it, that comes more into their own kind of PDR, personal professional development type sphere, I would say. So I'll pause, Karen, and let you jump in if I've covered most of that off.
No, that's fine. And I think really just a bit about the pastoral care, which is really important to us. Regular check-ins with the client and the pool member, just to see how things are going. We also check how the scope is going. So we're very familiar with, somebody will go in to do, X, Y, Z, and actually it might change. and it might change subtly, it might change quite significantly. So we're always checking to make sure that it's very clear what the pool member is going in to deliver, and if that changes, we recognise that. We also make sure that if there are any changing circumstances, if the pool member needs any additional support. So, for example, if they wanted to talk to somebody who's maybe been in a very similar situation, we can make those introductions based on previous assignments that have been completed. So, not necessarily a formal kind of coaching and mentoring arrangement, but an opportunity to talk to people just to sound them out, to provide that extra help and support if required. And we're also very much around, as I say, making those regular check-ins, and as Andrew mentioned, the closure call at the end to recognise really the achievement and the great work that's been delivered, and recognising that for future opportunities for the pool member, and also to understand the needs of the client.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to drop you in on that one, and I know that we've had conversations, haven't we, about how we can also support your members with that professional development side. We've got an event, I think it's January. It might be sooner than that, with your members to look at how we can support their professional development. So we've also got events around, say, becoming a chartered professional, but also the different programs that are available. So, and again, in terms of going forward, that's something I think we're planning to work much more collaboratively on, so that we can help to support people's career development in that way.
Definitely those networking opportunities, and you're making those introductions if people aren't already aware.
Mm-hmm. So we have no more questions that I've got. Last chance if anybody wants to put their hand up. Is there anything finally that you guys would like to sum up? And if not, I'll move on slightly.
Yep. So I think really just the main points for me is, we'd welcome if anybody has any particular questions or queries, or if they're thinking about joining NHS IMAS as a pool member, and they just want to talk it through, any member of the team will be more than happy to do that. And similarly, if, within your organisation, there are requirements where you need help and support, and there might be some future requirements for, assignments, again, by all means, get in touch if you've got any questions or queries. More than happy to, as I say, help and support all we can. And we're also very good at saying if we can't, we turn it around really quickly, so we don't kind of leave you hanging, so you then know whether or not there are opportunities and possibilities.
Okay, fantastic. Yes. So Carl has put his hand up.
Sorry, I just thought of one last thing.
That's good.
So obviously one of the things we're doing right across the board, and Joe's instrumental in driving this, is it's like standards and particular methodologies and approaches that are becoming sort of our staples across our profession. Do you have certain expectations, or do you have certain standards that you push, as your pool members must be operating to a particular standard? Especially, we know that government is pushing and raising the standard up in the ante. So do you echo those and saying, right, in order to be in a pool, you need to be operating certain national government standards and so on? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's more actually based on skills and expertise, is the focus.
And client requirements.
So, and because those requirements are quite diverse, there aren't any that we particularly stipulate, and we do actually find that there could be individuals, again with very different backgrounds, who come with all sorts of expertise and different experience. So we don't stipulate, but obviously we do help to draw that out. So if you have particular specialisms in areas, then obviously we can help and promote that.
And it comes from a type. So I'm sure, as you'll know, kind of they might need they could need a program purist, if you like, for want of a better phrase, to lead a program, or actually they might call somebody a program director, but what we actually want is a director of ops. So it's kind of that type of thing. So it very much depends on the the requirements of the client, I suppose.
I think there's also something about our role to raise awareness with the organisations themselves around the standards that should be in place, the approaches, the range of methodologies, so that they can make better informed, perhaps, requests or choices about what kind of resources they might need to be able to deliver on that particular change. And again, we can work together on that, where we, through our organisational membership, can support the embedding of standards so we get that consistency in place, but also as you're connecting with organisation, they've got requests, perhaps direct to, you know, are you aware of this? Is there, you know, something that could support you to embed this more effectively?